There we go. Maybe we got the technical issue sorted now with Victor. You're on with Shannon and Matt.
Hi.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Shannon.
Hello, Victor.
So I've been listening to you guys actually a bit. I actually converted not maybe less than a year or so ago. But at the same time, I listened to your show. Like, I was prepared to just turn everything off, but at the same time, you guys are kind of like interesting enough for me to go on, because you know how it goes. You get online, you hear something you don't want to hear, you don't like, you don't disagree with, you might just turn it off. But that's not the case. And I wanted here to just tell you a message of my faith, of my come to Jesus moment, I guess.
Okay. So what is your experience that you would like to impart to us that is compelling?
There was always it was a demon inside of me, but I never even considered it a demon, because this is actually a reason I wanted to call the show, because I saw in one episode that Matt, I even wrote notes about it, where Matt was talking to some guy in Arizona, and it was about nihilism and all that. But you ultimately said that without Christ, that with Christ, this is just a place, that life is just something that you do before eternity. And I do agree with that. But you made it seem as though this life is important. And hang on, excuse me, yeah.
Yeah, what you claim I said doesn't sound like me, so I'm already a little confused.
Oh, I've made like quick handwritten notes. So let me just read.
Why don't we do this instead, Victor?
Sure.
Instead of trying to rehash what you think I said, which would maybe force me to have to go back and rewatch the show to figure out which one. Why don't we just talk today and forget everything about the past? You can tell us about your demon, how you discovered it's a demon, how any of us could know it's a demon, stuff like that. Because what I said in the past isn't really relevant, is it?
Okay, part of it is, but I'm just saying, this life is dirty rags.
I'm literally
Matt.
Victor, I'm literally right here and can tell you what I think right now. So what I said in the past doesn't matter. You can always just ask me what I think right now.
Sure. Well, thank you. Okay. The Bible and Christ says that this life is dirty rags. You disagree with that. For the longest time, I disagreed with that, but I have lived life to the fullest. I've made a lot of money. I traveled all over the world. I had lots of time, but there was always an empty hole inside of me. But on top of that, there was rage and lust and anger. And I expressed this lust by a lot of girlfriends, but even with a lot of girlfriends, there was always I just needed more and more pornography, even though I tried to do stages without masturbation. But I found out, but this is where the demon comes in, because I actually started reading the Bible. I didn't expect the Bible. I read it because apparently all laws in the United States and in the Western world come originally from the Bible.
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
This is what I heard on a podcast. Again, I'm going to
stop going with
there's a story, but I'm
Victor. Stop going with just what you hear on a podcast, because in fact, the laws of the United States, the majority, you take the 10 Commandments, the majority of them are contravened by laws. Starting with the first one, thou shalt have no other gods before me. The United States actually has religious liberty, allowing that. There's no prohibition against lying, although there is one against perjury. The adultery laws are no longer have any teeth and can't be enforced. There's nothing that requires me by law to honor my father and mother. These things, the fact that societies have come up with laws, whether it be, the 10 Commandments or the Jewish law or the Code of Hammurabi or whatever, that these contribute to how societies build themselves is undeniable. But the laws and government of the United States are not based in any way on the Bible or Christianity. But I still want to get to this. So first of all, hang on. You seem to have this notion that sex is bad or masturbation is bad, something that I don't agree with at all, or that, it's too much, or that you have kind of porn addiction or whatever, which I don't think is possible unless you can demonstrate that it's doing something detrimental to your life. But at the end of the day, you blame all this on a demon. And I want to know, what on earth makes you think it's a demon, and how could you prove that to somebody?
And that is where I could go with my experience. As for the law, again, because I want to get to the point, but it's kind of a long story, but it goes like this. On the podcast, I heard an interesting thing about the law. Here's an interesting bit of trivia, not related to what we're talking to. Did you know that in the United States, you are not a citizen of the country, the United States, but a citizen of Washington, D.C.? So I wanted to know more about law. So I got myself to studying law because I had just so much time to do so. Then, while studying law, there kept on being biblical references. I didn't read the Bible before. I was not religious. Then I read the Bible, and then I realized so much of this felt so true, especially Proverbs. Proverbs felt like a punch to the gut, like bam, bam, every other page, every chapter, because every chapter is tiny in the Bible I have. And then I saw Christ, but I still had like this anger and this emptiness. And I'm saying, Christ, if you're there, help me. So more coincidence happened. That podcaster who taught me about the law put his hand on my shoulder, did a prayer, said, you are not allowed demons anymore. And all this anger and hello?
Yeah, we're still here.
We're here.
I'm trying to interrupt because first of all, I don't know. Because first of all, you started off with this thing that I'm not a citizen of the United States, but I'm actually a citizen of Washington, D.C. As far as I know, that must be, and is bizarrely not true. I mean, that's just not the case. And this is someone who, like, I did 8 years in the military. I'm a citizen of the United States, and you're telling me that I'm not a citizen of the United States. I'm a citizen of Washington, D.C. But you jump from that to Jesus told you that you're not going to have to deal with demons anymore. I'm just going to let Shannon talk.
Deep breath, Matt. Deep breath. Okay, so Victor, I think I actually have the whole story now. So it seems to me that you had an unfulfilled life, even though you had things that ostensibly should have been fulfilling to you based on what your expectations are, but by societal standards of what should be fulfilling, like being rich and being able to travel. Those things should just, we're taught that those things should be fulfilling. When they aren't fulfilling, sometimes it can be surprising. So that would lead to some form of despair potentially, and could lead to drug use, which it sounds like you were doing as well. Then you were exposed to this podcast No, let me finish. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this before we go down a million tangential rabbit holes. You were exposed to this podcaster. He said something about the law that you found was interesting. You realized that maybe there was some reference to the Bible that might be worth looking into. You looked into the Bible. It resonated with you somehow, but you still weren't entirely fulfilled. This podcaster, somehow you managed to get a relationship, put his hand on your shoulder, cast out these demons. And then at that point, you realized that Jesus had come into your life and the demon was gone now, and you felt fulfilled. Is that a pretty succinct summary of your story?
You got it perfectly right. And you're right about the drugs. There was Adderall and steroids, in fact.
Okay. So none of that, and I want you to make sure that you can understand this from the perspective of somebody like me. None of that is evidence that there was a demon in you. I can understand how for you, based on, I don't want to invalidate your individual experience, I can understand how for you, when you put all of those pieces together, the coordination between you reading the Bible and finding this podcaster may have given you a sense of fulfillment. But there's all kinds of pieces that are missing from this, as far as I can tell, Victor, because how you met this podcaster, the types of things this podcaster is saying, leads me to believe that maybe you have some sort of undue influence, potentially, and that undue influence may be leading you to believe that there's a sense of fulfillment by leaving these things behind, and potentially there isn't. Or you found another purpose in your life and that purpose being in your life, or that group of people that you've been accepted into, somehow gives you a sense of belonging to a community that was missing from you before. All of those things are reasons, very valid external reasons, why those lustful feelings that you potentially had and that feeling of unfulfillment that you potentially had could have dissipated or been replaced by other feelings. None of those to me are evidence of a demon. If you hadn't been told demons existed by somebody else external of you, you wouldn't have even made or drawn that affiliation. That affiliation seems to have been drawn for you by exposure to the Bible and exposure to this podcaster / preacher who also apparently expels demons from people. So if you're attempting to have a conversation where you're going to compel somebody like me to believe these sorts of things, you're going to need something significantly less circumstantial than that, because I just, based on this mild interaction that we're having right now with just a little tiny bit of information regarding the circumstances surrounding your conversion, can see plausible reasons that it's not what you're saying that would line up with external experience and psychology that, for a multitude of people. So I'm not compelled. Do you understand why I wouldn't be compelled?
I can. And you seem to have finished almost my story in many ways. The only thing though is that this anger, because a huge driving motivation for me was anger. I hated people and I wanted revenge. So so my money making efforts, my seduction efforts, my time at the gym, that was anger. And now that anger it felt like that was expulsed from me through the power of Jesus. So
it may not necessarily be the power of Jesus, though, Victor. It could be the fact that you found a community. You were throwing your energy into things you thought would make you happy, and they didn't. And continuing to throw your energy into things that you think are supposed to make you happy, that leads to disappointment spirals. And if you're in a consistent disappointment spiral and you have external reinforcement telling you these are the things that are supposed to make you happy, when you finally kind of drill it down and realize that the things that really do make you happy are individual relationships, for example, and you find an individual relationship, you can then draw the correlation that this relationship that I'm having is because of my exposure to the Bible. And it may well be because of your exposure to the Bible and Christianity that you formed those relationships, but it's the relationships themselves that may have appeased that psychological dissonance. You're drawing the conclusion that it was Jesus entering his spirit into you, when it may just be acceptance, the ability to feel as though you're atoning for things that that you feel guilty for, the realization that you can let go of the spiral of things that were supposed to make you happy that didn't, that led to disappointment. All of those things could culminate into you feeling as though that severe anxiety is abated in you, and you're no longer seeking out a source for happiness, because you found that the source for happiness is a simple thing like individual relationships, and not consistently seeking to attain things that don't actually have any sort of tangential value to being connected to humanity. Victor?
Before I say anything more, you're good, Shannon. You're good. I know about Matt Dillahunty and some of his history. I don't think I've seen you on the show.
I've not been here before, so that makes sense.
Are you perchance a psychologist, or just very into psychology?
I have a degree in psychology. Yes. I have a degree in psychology. Yes. But I'm not a psychologist.
You know your stuff. You know your stuff, and that sense of community that you're saying, that I am in agreement with you that there is other human beings in my life, but I felt like I had a community before, but once again, my opinion of people was one of hatred. And if I can say, and one more thing really, was that one thing I learned about sin and not sin is that sin isn't just doing something bad or naughty, but it's going against God's laws. And when you go against God's laws, you are living, you are cursed, and you are inviting demons into your body, into your life.
Hang on.
I think that you're just conflating demons with bad emotions. You're just conflating demons with bad emotions. You're just saying when I feel bad emotions, that is a demon. You can, if you remove demon from the equation, if you don't even utilize the word demon anymore, you can have a more coherent and helpful and productive dialogue about how to act and interact in the world and find that kind of happiness. Once you inject demon, you're actually removing a layer of responsibility and culpability from yourself and the other people around you as well. For culpability for your own actions and engagement in your life. So if you remove demons from the equation and just say, okay, when I feel bad emotions, I should do some introspective action to find the source of those bad emotions. If the source of those bad emotions is that I'm actively seeking things that are detrimental to me because I think they're supposed to make me happy and they aren't, which sounds like it might be the case in your story, then once you identify that and isolate that, then you can take logical, knowledgeable, productive steps towards actually finding happiness. And it may have worked for you this time, but the problem with things like this is when you say a demon is what inhabits you and is causing this scenario to take place, you are shifting the burden of your own life choices away from you to something else, something that's not tangible. And you're actually at a detriment to yourself and other people if you purport these types of things, because you're preventing, they're thinking that the hands can be laid on them or they can read a book and that obstacle will be removed. And that is not always the case. It may have been the case circumstantially for you in this instance, but when you purport to these sorts of things, what you're saying is that somebody can say a prayer and it'll remove that burden. And what happens when it doesn't? What happens when it inevitably and invariably does not? The damage starts to snowball because what was supposed to remove it from you didn't remove it from you because it can't, because it's not real. What really does remove it from you is if you actually do the hard work and investing and finding out what the issue really, really is. This is a wall that you're putting in front of you because you think it solved a problem. It didn't. You're just making a correlation because of the circumstances.
Part why so many believers are struggling with incredible difficulties and desperately in need of counseling, while the church, in many cases, different varieties of churches, discourage any sort of counseling that isn't directly with the minister of that church, rather than people going out and getting the help they need. The thing that you said just recently, I would argue is clearly false, because you said that your understanding is that if you are living outside of God's law, then you are guilty and then will be subject to demons. So let me ask you a couple of quick questions. Do you think I'm living do you think I'm living outside of God's law?
Of course you are.
Do you think that I'm suffering from demonic possession or interaction?
If you're not suffering, there's demons close to you. And I do believe that you are cursing your...
That, by the way, is an incredibly dishonest way to engage with this, because the question I'm asking is trying to get to this claim that you have, that if you're living outside of God's law, you're giving yourself up to demons. And when I ask if I have, your answer changes to, if you're living outside of God's law, you're either being played by demons or they're close to you. Well, I'll give a shit if they're close to me. I want to know if they're real and if they have any impact on my life. And if it turns out that there's no impact on my life, then your hypothesis about living outside of God's law is clearly wrong, correct?
In my experience, I am feeling that without Christ and Jesus, you are just going to be cursed, and it's going to wither away at you.
But your experience, what experience?
But you don't seem to be living like that either.
Victor, what experience do you have with my life?
The experience I have is just that you seem like a well-adjusted man, and I'm wondering if there's any other curses in your life, because I'm just wondering whether are we just more and more cursed, because I was cursed in spite of all the good things.
What is a curse, Victor, and how could you ever demonstrate that a curse is in place?
Just that much like me, the feelings, just no mercy, no sense of mercy or righteousness, and constant anger, anxiety, and lust overpowering me.
for you, it seems that curse is seemingly synonymous with bad things happen and a sense of hopelessness.
And an emptiness in my hole. That's correct.
An emptiness in your hole. Okay. But curse, so is it possible for someone to feel emptiness when they're not cursed?
No, because if you follow God's laws, you will.
No. How do you know that? So if somebody doesn't feel empty, it's impossible for somebody to feel empty when they're not cursed, is what you're saying. How do you know that?
It just goes back to Proverbs and the
don't care
experience of
about
having
Proverbs.
the demon cast out of me.
I want evidence, not what Proverbs said, and not what you think you've injected into or pulled out of Proverbs. I want actual evidence, right? Because what you call a curse by Proverbs, a Muslim might call a jinn from Allah. That essentially is giving you over to, the Bible talks about giving you over to reprobate mind. Other religions will say that, evil spirits and genies. Others will say that it's fate or karma, that you did something in your past life, that is why this life here is so messed up. With multiple different candidate explanations for why there's hopelessness or struggling in your life, how did you determine that the answer you've come up with is the right one? How did you rule out the notion that in a past life you were just shitty?
Because I've read those books before. I had the Tao Te Ching, I had the Bhagavad Gita, and I had the Dhammapada and other Buddhist texts, hoping that maybe a little bit of their answers might. But instead, I just realized that just invited demons, so I chucked those into the garbage. This is
what you've just
by going to Jesus,
done, Victor, is not made anything remotely approaching a reasonable, sound argument, but just an assertion that you've read a bunch of stuff and this is the one you've decided is true, and that's not going to be convincing for me.
Fine, fine. It might not be convincing, but it was like one experience that led me, and it was. But yeah, and I could tell you the date and time it happened. So
I believe that it really happened, and I can tell you, I believe that it happened at that date and that time. But I also believe that there is a strong chance that you are assigning a value to this experience that is a misattribution. So this is just a correlational effect. It could potentially just be a correlational effect. You just so happened to be at a point where you were seeking certain aspects of your life. Maybe you were ready, whatever. It could have been, you could have inserted another book where the Bible was potentially and come to some of the same revelations, but attribute it to that book that you were reading. And one of the reasons that I think that you are doing this misattribution is because when you're asked for evidence, when you're asked for, okay, well, how do you know it's this and not that? You say, well, I read it. What I hear is, well, I read it in this book. And this is the book that I read that seems to have appealed to me somehow. And it coordinated time-wise with what happened to me, what felt like the cessation of this depression. Now, go ahead, man. No, go ahead. I'm pretty much finished.
We should probably wrap this up and move on to some other callers, because that'll give Victor some time to think about what you've said and reformulate stuff. And you can always come back if you have a better case for it. But I'm hoping that you understand why, if somebody tells me, oh, things have felt bad and hopeless, and I became convinced that it's a curse, but I have no evidence other than I became convinced it's a curse. Hopefully you can understand why that isn't convincing to me, to the point where you should realize, hopefully, why it shouldn't be convincing to you. Like, we should believe things for a good reason. And if the reason's not compelling enough for someone else to become convinced of it, then maybe we've made a mistake in becoming convinced ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And it could potentially be damaging.
Yeah, sounds fair enough.
Thanks, Victor.
Fair enough. I don't know what else to say.
Yep.
Thanks for chatting, Victor.
Thanks for the call. As a reminder, we normally would be at the building, and any atheist or atheist friendly person that happens to be in the Austin area would get to come down to the Free Thought Library, and we would have a show, a dinner after the show, and meet, greet, and all that stuff. That stuff isn't happening. However, it's worth reminding people about the ACA Discord. If you feel that you're in need of conversation and there's somebody that you'd like to interact with, there are a bunch of people actively on the ACA Discord, as well as a number of other resources around that don't even include the ACA. So you can reach out to Recovering from Religion, recoveringfromreligion.org, etc. if you're having doubts or questions. And if you need the advice of someone trained in psychology and you don't have Shannon's personal cell phone number, you can also reach out to the Particular Therapist Project, and they will put you in touch with someone who will offer you science-based, real working counseling without appealing to gods or the supernatural at all.